And at Fourth Space, we work with our university community to help mobilize knowledge by co-creating daily activities that examine research questions, projects, things in development here at the university. And we're running today's event as a live stream meeting. So we welcome any comments or questions with a raised hand or via the chat if you're joining by Zoom. And for those of you in the space, if you want to participate, just let us know, raise your hand. We'll be sure to get a microphone to you. With that, it's very much my pleasure to hand it over to our moderator for today, space educator, Plateau Astro, Trevor Kjorlien. Trevor, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you all for coming in the physical space and the online space. Yes, my name's Trevor. I run Plateau Astro, which is a one-person outreach company about space and astronomy. So thanks so much for having me. A little bit about AstroYeast. I'm going to bring up Stephen Lee in a second here. So about 2 or 3 years ago, NASA and the Canadian Space Agency started a program called the Deep Space Food Challenge, which I will probably repeatedly call Deep Food Space Challenge. I've been like struggling with that the last few days while preparing this. So I started that in 2021, and a lot of teams applied, and AstroYeast got through the first phase. They got through the second phase. And then there are only 10 teams remaining, and now there's only 4 teams remaining. They've actually like got money and stuff out of this, not just like NASA stickers or decals or anything like that. They've actually got money to do their project, and they're going to announce the winner, the final winner, in a few weeks in spring 2024. I have no date for you. Spring 2024. Yes, that. I'm not going to butcher the explanation anymore. So let's bring Stephen Lee up to talk a little bit about AstroYeast.
All right, thank you, Trevor. So I guess, can you guys see? Yeah, all right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. Thank you for joining us, those who are online. So my name is Stephen, and I am the co-lead of AstroYeast. And at AstroYeast, we are a team of undergrad, graduates, and also recent alumni, mostly from Concordia, but we have people from other universities as well. And we're very diverse in our academic background. We're also very diverse in our cultural background. And that's really so also striving, our mission is to strive to develop novel food technologies for people on Earth, for human on Earth, and the moon and beyond. So to achieve those missions, we have 2 different projects. And so among these 2 projects, the first one Trevor mentioned is with the Deep Space Food Challenge. And to that project, we're trying to develop a food production system that will help us produce yeast that is both nutrient enriched and flavor enriched. We're doing that with Deep Space Food Challenge, and we're currently a finalist. So hopefully we can be a winner as well. The other project that we're working on is also initiative to the CSA, or the Canadian Space Agency. And that's called CUBIC, so the CubeSat initiative for Canada and STEM. So we're doing this project in collaboration with Space Concordia, who's also another student association at Concordia. And essentially, the goal with that project is to study and investigate the viability of yeast in space and also of our own optogenetic strain. So that's essentially the gist of what we're doing. And without further ado, I want to thank the panelists for agreeing to join us today for this panel. And I'll hand back the mic here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Stephen. Yeah, so we have 3 panelists today. We have 2 people physically at this table. We also have 1 other person remote in Saskatchewan right now. So I'll start by just a little quick bio for each of them. So I'll start with Gordon Munroe. So Gordon Munroe got his diploma in biotechnology from Sask Polytech in 2013. He worked at Dow AgroSciences for 4 years. Oh, he's there. Oh, good, good. And in 2022, he joined the Global Institute for Food Security in their Omics Precision Agricultural Lab. He's raised in Sandy Bay, northern Saskatchewan. He is of Cree Indigenous descent and is passionate about mentoring and encouraging Indigenous youth to start career paths in STEM. There's an entire bio that is on the website that I've had to crunch into something that can fit on a piece of paper like this. So you've done a lot more, but I'll had to pack it into there. Next, Ophelia Sarakinis. Pronunciation?
Perfect.
Good, okay. Ophelia is the CEO and founder of GUSH, an indoor strawberry farm in Montreal's Garment District. I didn't know this existed until I started working on this. So where they grow strawberries 365 days a year. Or I guess, yeah, this year, 366 days a year. It's a leap year, okay. She's a graduate of farm management and technology from McGill, where she combines sustainable farming with advanced tech like LED lighting and hydroponics. Yes? Everything was true? Okay. Last person, we have Wade Thorhaug. And Wade grew up in a farm in southern Saskatchewan. A lot of Saskatchewan representation here. Okay. I'm from Alberta, so this is a prairie show, obviously. Okay. He received his Bachelor of Science from the University of Calgary. He moved to Iqaluit, Nunavut, and there he grew an appreciation for Canada's variety of regional food systems and endangered Indigenous methods of managing land. He's president of the Kajukturvik Community Food Center. All right, okay. Which is a hub of food culture in Iqaluit. You got 2 pieces of paper. He's been an advocate to push multiple levels of government for more equitable food systems. And he's now newly based in Montreal. Newly meaning 2 years, I just found. So newly, air quotes, and he's eager to get involved in the urban food movement. Maybe so eager you're already in the urban food movement. We'll find out. Did I get the bios? Good. All right. Good. I guess we'll start off with an audience pandering question. This is for you too. What is the correct way, in your opinion, to pronounce the word animated GIF or animated GIF? If you think it's animated GIF, put your hand up. Me and Steven. Okay. Animated GIF? Wow, that's okay. That's pretty overwhelming. Okay. I'm going to start with Gordon, you over there in Saskatchewan. The name of the institute you work at is the Global Institute for Food Security. How is it pronounced? GIFs or GIFs?
GIFs.
GIFs. Okay, so me and Steven are not going to be, okay, we're not going to be right. Okay. All right, audience pandering questions are done. Okay, let's get into the real questions here. Okay. So the first section, I'm going to talk to you individually, and then we'll open up to more discussion. I've been lucky. Pretty much every day of my life, I've been able to like walk to a grocery store, and I could like get any food that I wanted. Food insecurity sort of felt very theoretical to me. It sort of felt academic to me. I would never say that I'm a food secure person, though I probably am. So it still feels a bit conceptual to me. So I just want to ask, I'm going to ask Gordon, then I'm going to ask you after Wade. What does food insecurity look like for Indigenous people? Like what boots on the ground, like everyday life, what does food insecurity actually mean?
You just said it right there. Everyday life. It's an everyday thing. It's there's issues with shipping. There's issues with freshness. There's issues with sustainability. A lot of these communities are in poverty. So there's political, socioeconomic issues going on here. We could talk for an hour on some of this stuff, but a lot of the issues that each community faces are also individual, contextual to the places they are, right? So access to resources. There's a lot of studies going on with 7 indicators that test for sustainability and sovereignty for food security in a lot of First Nations communities. Mm-hmm. So you would probably have to ask each region and community to get a different response, because they all each have their own issues that they're facing regionally in Canada here.
I guess for Wade, that might be a good question to bring in. So you lived in Iqaluit, Nunavut. How long were you up in Iqaluit?
I was there for about 8 years.
8 years?
Yeah.
Okay. What does food insecurity look like all the way up north up there?
Yeah, so I mean, I know we just wanted to preface this by saying that I am a settler Canadian and I'm not from the North. And so while I can kind of speak to my experiences there, I'm not speaking from an Indigenous experience. And also my experiences are limited to above the tree line. So I don't really know too much about what the experiences are north or in northern communities below the tree line. But yeah, the current situation, high food insecurity, this all really stems from our history of colonialism in this country. And so we have a few big things that have resulted from that. And the big one is poverty. So food insecurity is directly related to income. If you increase income, you increase food security. If you decrease income, you increase food insecurity. So that's the thing that is always key in looking at solutions to food insecurity. We cannot really ignore the income issue. But another big effect of colonialism, and this was a result of some very deliberate systematic actions by the federal government over the years, was to basically limit or to disconnect people from their own local food system. And so now we have this situation where we have, the majority of foods coming from the majority of people's dietary intake coming from grocery stores, from food that's flown in from the South, when obviously historically that was not the case. And it's a result of some policies that have taken place, that have been implemented to limit people's capacity to produce food, to harvest food locally in their own environments.
I'll question you in a second, but it occurred to me, food insecurity can feel like an academic term, at least in my experience. How do you define food sovereignty? I'll open that up to Gordon to start, and then maybe Wade, I'll get yours. And if you want to chime in, obviously, I do have a question directed towards you. I do swear, but Gordon, maybe I could open that up to you. Food sovereignty.
I believe food sovereignty should be community-based. It should be defined by the community that's impacted by this. It should be the leaders of the community. They know what they need in their specific region. The knowledge that's passed down through generations of harvesting, foraging, hunting patterns, that should be freely passed down to each member of the community who needs it. The processing, the availability for resources, the managing of said resources should all be in the community's hands and control. A lot of these diets that have been introduced to the Native community through colonial activity are very bad for our health. So we know what's good for us. We know that the place that we eat is probably the healthiest for us that are from there. So we need to control all aspects of manufacturing, production, access, availability, policy. All those need to be controlled by the community.
Wade?
Yeah, I'll add to that. So yeah, I believe that food sovereignty is local control of your own food system, and that's just everything from production to distribution and everything. So in the situation that we have now, where where grocery stores dominate the food landscape in northern communities, I mean, those are not in local control. These are companies that are headquartered in, say, Winnipeg or elsewhere, and that's not what I would consider local. That a food sovereign community is one that, essentially has their food options and their prices dictated to them.
I was just gonna say, I remember there being some photos, or maybe it was a video tour of somebody gave, this might have been 10 years ago or so, when somebody was giving a walkthrough tour of a northern community and the prices of certain foods. And I think it just stuck out to me that a 4-liter jug of Tropicana orange juice is like $25. And that's 10 years ago or so right now. And that just stuck out to me.
Yeah,
Yep.
I remember the same thing, fresh fruits and vegetables. Apparently it's just not something you can access unless you're wealthy. The prices are just astronomical. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ophelia, so questions for you. Can you describe just a little bit about GUSH?
yeah,
I'm saying the
absolutely.
name. Okay. Yeah, tell us a little bit about
For
GUSH.
sure. So we grow food indoors, and we grow gourmet strawberries in Montreal year round. And we do it with vertical hydroponics. So that means that we can set up a farm that's virtually anywhere, anytime. And that's the mission. The mission for us is really to be able to grow anywhere as efficient as possible.
Okay. So what are the barriers in sustainable farming in your opinion?
Yeah, so there's quite a few barriers. That's why it's not as popular as other forms of agriculture yet. It's still very cost prohibitive, so it's more expensive to do things the right way. So for example, more expensive and more complex. So for us, we recirculate all our water so that we use 95% less water than traditional agriculture can use. And this is helpful when you're in places like up north where maybe there's not enough water, or on the moon, wherever. So in order to recirculate our water and be able to reuse it, there's more costs associated because we're filtering, we're doing sanitation of the water, and then the actual nutrient management is a lot more complex when you're dealing with that. So, it's more expensive to do things sustainably, and it's challenging, complex.
Right.
Yeah.
Questions for all of you. We'll move into the next part, the current approaches part, and then we'll move a little bit later to the future approaches part. I look so fancy with a pen. I don't know. I'm not even really writing that much here. Anyways, looking official. Current approaches. Question for anybody, you can chime in. What are we currently doing to promote food security and sovereignty? And what's working and what isn't? I guess, Gordon, if I don't see whenever you have anything, you can just put your hand up. Maybe I'll see the corner of my eye and I'll try to flag you down. But you have the microphone right now, so I'll just want to
Sure.
jump. Yeah.
Yeah, so I find I don't know if out of all the provinces, it does seem like Quebec cares a lot about food sovereignty. So I do feel happy to be here for that, but it doesn't extend to the rest of Canada necessarily. But one of the things that they do is like marketing initiatives like Aliments du Québec. So that's one of the initiatives that they're trying to put in place. But just because we have Aliments du Québec here, that's all, bringing the awareness doesn't mean it's happening in the rest of Canada where it really matters, like up north and in these native communities. So
Yeah. Wade?
So I would say that like ultimately, if you're looking at tackling food insecurity, if you're not looking at income, you're only doing it, covering it, or trying to address it in sort of a limited way, or you will have a limited impact. So that aside, I know there have been a lot of food system interventions over the years, and I'll go through and I'll mention a few of them and talk about why I think they didn't really work out. So there's some, and I think that unfortunately, because the people of the powers that be are coming at this from a not intentionally colonial, but like an unintentionally colonial, but an agricultural mindset, that they may not, these interventions often end up failing because they're being applied to environments where it's essentially just culturally inappropriate, or even environmentally inappropriate. So in the 70s, they tried to farm pigs in Nunavut. They had a fish packing plant where they were harvesting local fish and then feeding the fish scraps to the pigs. I'm sure you can imagine, if you had some pork that tasted like fish, why this didn't pan out as a good idea. There was another idea more recently, 5 years ago. There were some students that went on to Dragon's Den and pitched these shipping containers with a hydroponic setup that grew all sorts of leafy greens, and they were essentially targeting the northern Canada as their target market because of the high food prices. They were kind of underestimating the cost, the electrical and heating costs of that, as well as the community buy-in. Like, there's not a lot of necessarily demand for this sort of thing. And so far they have, despite their intentions, they've barely sold any in the north. And in that episode of Dragon's Den, they mentioned they were talking about a prospective buyer in Iqaluit, and like I said, it's a way to sweeten the pitch. And that was me, but I mean, I wasn't really that interested. Like, I maybe replied to some emails, so I thought that was kind of funny that they put me in the show. So I think that the interventions that were like that are overlooked, and maybe getting ahead of myself talking about like potentially better interventions, is the ones that are decolonial in nature, that are like working within the local food systems and with complete community buy-in, and using ideas that are coming from the communities rather than ones that are coming from outside of the community.
Gordon?
And I can add to that when we're actually, I know it's terminology, but when it's like interventions, I rather view it as partnerships. I think it's trust issue with say outsiders coming to a community, discussing what they need without asking them. There needs to be an establishment of trust before any work can move forward, and in any kind of partnerships that involve Indigenous communities. Historically, we've got a lot of reasons to mistrust governments, outside institutions, corporations for thinking they know what's best for us. It's I think you'd make more inroads coming to a community, asking first what they need, asking first what they want, and asking first if some of the stuff that may impact them is actually what's needed up there, up in the communities that I'm thinking about in Saskatchewan here. So establishment of trust first for any kind of partnership needs to be established first and foremost. And it takes a lot to establish trust from First Nations communities. The knowledge keepers and the elders have to be approached, and there's certain ways that that trust is established. But yeah, that's the first thing. And yes, the interventions from the past have not worked because it was more of I'm doing for you instead of I'm doing with you, right? And that never works.
I know you said that a lot of interventions in the past haven't worked. Are there any that could like sort of serve as a model for?
I can't bring any to my mind. There is some partnerships here at a reserve called White Buffalo, and there's some partnerships here and there's successes on the communities. Poverty's gone down. They have paved roads. They have casinos, and if you just look them up, there's a good example of good trusted partnerships with corporations and the government and First Nations communities. So, yeah, that's just established of what they need. And a lot of communities too, not only food security, there's water security concerns. And I know a lot of Northern First Nations, those are even come before us food security because there's still no fresh water on some of these reserves, right? So you don't have fresh water, you're not going to have good food security as well. Yeah.
I probably accidentally butchered the pronunciation of it, but when you were up north, that Kajuk Turvik, do you want to pronounce that so the audience? Okay, you were president of the community food center there. What was it? Could you describe maybe what was it like before, and like what has it evolved into? And would that be considered a successful partnership, or I'm avoiding the word intervention, but partnership?
Yeah, well, that was an interesting period of my life because it sort of it was during my transformation from when I arrived to when I left the community, and I came with a lot of these like really, these essentially like colonial mindset. I had these ideas about food insecurity in the north and like what the problems were and why they were and what the solutions were. And yeah, I got involved with this pretty rough and tumble sort of soup kitchen that was had half its foot in the Anglican church that was right next door. And long story short, I'm not going to sit here and trash the church all night, but eventually got it to the point where it was less charitable, like less about just providing food and more about how do we how do we strengthen community resiliency? And that's what I wanted to see with that organization. I would say that ultimately this is again a very limited measure is to have these organizations in community, Iqaluit being just one of 26 communities in Nunavut. So there's only so much we can do there, but we moved into being a hub for country food in the community. So we started to network with hunters in the territory to buy food from them and then distribute into the community. We had like a sort of like a sliding scale to make it sustainable, where we have people paying for food and people who can't really afford it to getting it much more cheaply or for free. But basically looking at ways that, we can, instead of just working, outside of the food system, but to kind of to work within it a bit more.
Okay.
Yeah.
We can talk a lot about like policy and community work. Maybe it's like shifted like technology stuff. Let's say like over the last, say, 10, 15, maybe 20 years, what sort of technology has worked in the last 10, 15 years, 20 years? Why do I keep expanding the time frame? In the last 20 years, what sort of technology has sort of been introduced that has helped to increase food security and sovereignty, if it has at all? Gordon or Wade, you have the mic.
Well, what technologies? I would say advances in shipping, preservation, supply chain, sustainability. I'm only speaking for very northern communities that have limited access to, say, trade routes, right? Those technologies in shipping and supply chain sustainability are sometimes lifelines to these isolated communities. Again, with preservations of processed foods, where then we start talking about the health, right? So coming from a northern Saskatchewan perspective, just reliability on supply routes and advancements in shipping technologies, I guess, from my perspective.
Okay, like logistics, like being able to know
Yes.
when something is coming in on time.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
In the past 10 to 20 years, I wouldn't say much. I'd say that a lot of that, what Gordon is speaking to is technologies, but also just better infrastructure. Like we're starting the government is starting to recognize a need for the North to have just as good as infrastructure as in Southern Canada. But yeah, I'd say like the last big technology to have a huge impact in the food system was the introduction of the snowmobile. But that goes back, 60, 70 years, and that really changed the way that food was harvested locally.
Mm-hmm. Just because you don't have like dependable road routes that would be not paved, that's not the word I'm looking for, cleared in time, that you could go over rough terrain.
Yeah, in Nunavut you have no roads.
Right.
So, but like, yeah, I mean, they replaced essentially having to manage dog teams, which, I mean, these kind of technologies are useful in some ways, but then they also create dependencies that, for example, instead of having to deal with a dog team, which is, I mean, you can just sustain on your own without any external inputs. Now you have a snowmobile, which requires fuel, it requires maintenance, it requires like, replacement of like expensive parts every so often. So these are things that they're in a sense, they're a convenience, and then they facilitate the act of harvesting food, but they come at a cost and this like financial cost that you need to incorporate into how you do things.
Yeah. Ophelia, for you,
Yeah.
how long have you been in the industry, sustainable farming?
We've been doing this for about 4 years now for research and development, and now we're at the commercial stage.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know I just asked them like, but the last 15, 20 years, maybe that's a bit too broad of a scope, but like for yourself in sustainable agriculture, what sort of have been the big pushes in the last 20 years, if you can name?
The cost of LEDs have completely come down. So now you could have farms in these remote places. And it's interesting you brought up the container farms because I did consulting for them. But it's still prohibitively expensive, and it doesn't, look, there's costs there. It's a very, very expensive way to grow. And there's still a long way that we have to go to bring the costs down and make these systems more resource efficient.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely the LED technology is getting better.
Mm-hmm.
It's using less electricity and it's more affordable now. So I think that helps a lot. But in terms of Native American communities. I'm not sure exactly details of what technologies, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Wade or Gordon, can you? Maybe I've been to Nunavut once to see a solar eclipse, and it was cloudy, so maybe that's a premonition. I don't know. I don't have too much experience with Canada's north. What does agriculture look like up there? Excuse my ignorance. Like it does sort of feel like that's why I'm here to learn. Of like, is it mostly like a hunting type of diet's not the right word. What is it that people eat that hasn't? What do people eat? Sorry, that sounds super like a silly question, but like, what is it? What is the diet mostly up there?
Yeah, so there really is no agriculture. And I mean, there's a little bit, and I'll talk about that in a second, but I mean, historically, it's foods that are harvested from the land. So we're talking about, sea mammals, seals, whales, land mammals like caribou, Arctic char, a whole, geese, that sort of thing. All stuff that all things that can be, if managed properly, can be harvested sustainably and that provide all that you need to survive. And yeah, I mean, this is what going back to these sort of, like the agricultural approach to solving solving food insecurity in the north, I find is a real mismatch with Nunavut. I know that, and I don't want to sort of completely dismiss the prospects of some of these projects, because, and I know the person sitting next to me, and I also have other colleagues that have been working on this. Even if we have the, for example, greenhouses or hydroponics shipping containers that can grow food, a lot of times I just coming over a cold, so that's why I'm suppressing a cough here. But
Gordon, put up your hand anytime if you need to interrupt.
No, I'm just
save his throat. So.
Yeah, well, up north, and I can only speak from Woodland Cree perspective, which is my people, and that's encompasses all of the northern regions of Canada, not including in the Inuit territories. But from us, there is very limited agriculture up there. It's a hunting, gathering, and foraging society I grew up in. There is agriculture on a very, very limited community level basis. But the most sustenance we get are from the land, from what we gather from the land, from what we hunt, and from what we fish, and some of the foraging we do. But yeah, agriculture is very limited. But that does exist, but on a community based level, and a lot of them on the stuff familial level too, right? So it's limited up there, based on the territory and available land for farming, and it just doesn't exist.
Yeah. What actually? This is kind of. What are you going to say?
Sorry, I just want to finish my thought. Yeah, a lot of times, like even if the funding exists to create a greenhouse and the capacity exists to set this up, the community buy-in often isn't there. So you have this, and somebody once said that like you go through communities in North, and you're in like one of the things that's striking is that there's almost always an abandoned greenhouse, because like somebody had found the means to find the funding and the wherewithal to get it going, and it probably went for like a few years, but then eventually, it's hard for us to understand this as Southerners, because we can always, in any community you can always find someone in their 60s and 70s who would happily run manage a greenhouse in their free time, because we grew up in that. But it's much more difficult in communities that do not have a history of agriculture to expect people to just run these things and keep them well maintained. And
it's just like not part of the fabric or tradition to do that.
Yeah, exactly. It's like saying, handing one of us in this crowd here a gun and saying like, grocery store is going to be closed, go hunt something. It's like, well, I'm just assuming nobody knows most of us don't know how to do that. So
right. I think I was going to move to the future approaches section of this, and I'm interested because you brought up a good point there about just abandoned greenhouses, and like I think there's a certain segment There's certainly a segment in me that is like I'm a web developer, programmer type person, so I can see things from like a very like, oh, there's a technological solution to it. We can apply this everywhere, and it's just going to work everywhere. And then, bang, the problem is solved. I'll ask this question, but then I'll add an asterisk after that. Can you see space technologies being used in Canada's north? So, Gordon, you kind of mentioned this before, of like what were some of the big changes to food security, and it was shipping, and it was the logistics of like getting food to places on time. Can you see any other like space technologies being used?
I've heard of a biosynthetic wrapping that some people were working on that would help preserve fresh fruits and vegetables that were shipped to the north. That's some of the innovations that I've heard of. Just that would help bring, just help with the diet with fruits and vegetables. Other than that, there's not much that space technologies could have with logistics and shipping and preservations of, perishables.
Yeah.
Could I add
Yep.
one more thing?
Absolutely.
I am under an extraordinary circumstance here in Saskatchewan. My wife is a teacher, and they are going on strike as of right now. And it's -30. The province is actually physically locking them out.
Oh, wow.
And so she's phoning me saying she's being locked out of her school right now, and it's -30. So I have to go and get her like right
Okay.
away.
Totally makes sense, and absolutely, I hope your wife is okay. All right.
Yeah, she'll be fine. It's just the politics here with the teachers going on strike in Saskatchewan. So
Yeah,
it's
absolutely. Well,
impacting this right now, right? So
absolutely. Well, thank you for coming on. And Gene, if you need to head out right now.
yeah, I gotta head out right now. So I want to thank you for having me. I hope I answered sufficiently enough. Sorry for my limited participation, but I hope we can do this again. So please keep me informed and let me know how the prize goes for the NASA Food Challenge.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, say goodbye, Gordon. There.
Absolutely.
Yeah, sorry, you were gonna say, yeah.
I'm learning so much. This is crazy. Yeah. So I had a very interesting, a different answer. But now that you're telling me about the cultural aspect that contributes to it, I feel like I have to rethink my solutions. But basically, what is the solution if culturally it's not part of their DNA, right? So I think my answer might be to either get people inspired to do it, or maybe, yeah, it's a challenge. I don't know. I'm curious to hear your thoughts about what sort of.
Sorry, just refilling my water. I guess I'd still ask you the question, in spite of what Wade just said, and then we'll talk about that a little bit after. It's like, what sort of things with indoor farming, like what sort of space technologies could you? Maybe this isn't even the question I should be asking. Like, what are you excited about in terms of your agricultural farming?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's so much to be excited about.
Because before you mentioned LED lighting,
Yeah.
is there other things on the pipeline that, like, maybe before I asked the question before, you were like, oh, this could be greatly applied to the north, but wait.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Dose of reality to us.
Well, I was imagining, because the north, if there's not that culture of growing, then there probably are people who would want to grow. So getting them out there, but then maybe that's not good either. So I'm not really sure exactly.
Okay.
But yeah, there's so many different technologies I'm excited about. More specifically, the energy system. Like, as soon as we can get electricity and energy that's sustainable, that's going to change indoor farming completely, because it unlocks it and it makes it accessible for everyone. And I'm sure even with, AstroYeast, there's probably like an energy intensive process, maybe not, but perhaps there is. And so having that energy would be really, really, really helpful. And I know so many people are researching ways to get sustainable energy widespread. So.
Mhm.
that's what I'd say.
This is a question about energy. Like you're probably right now energy intensive.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
But-
You're drawing right from like Hydro-Quebec.
Exactly.
Okay. Is there plans to like?
Transition away from that?
Yeah, and then only like wait and ask you questions about like what power sources are up
Exactly.
there.
Good question. Yeah. What?
Oh, well, you start first. So like your farms here in
We do use hydro.
Okay.
We use Hydro-Quebec, but we do have plans to go elsewhere in Canada. And so we would look at sustainable forms of electricity
Okay,
for those. But hydro, we're really lucky with, and it works well for our needs.
right. You were talking about snowmobiles before.
Yeah. And
And-
fuel.
Yeah, I was gonna say like fuel, like this dependency that's brought in from this convenience. I'm sure you could apply that too to fuel sources too. What you were there for eight years, you said? And you were there 10 years ago, and then 8 years, and then now 2 years. You moved there 10 years ago. That's the
Yes.
weirdest way to phrase it, but you were there. Okay.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. What's like the primary fuel sources up where you were?
Yeah, so I guess that's, I mean, and so, I'm sorry for everything I've said so far, but it's,
No.
yeah, but I want to say that, like, I mean, there are people that do, you know, they grow stuff indoors. And you know, not just people that come from the south. There's people that are from the area that still do this, and so it's not a completely foreign, like it's not completely out there as a possibility. It's just very limited. Yeah, and I'm always I'm always wary of like anything that requires any sort of external energy inputs, because yeah, in the case of Nunavut, and then also probably I guess the other northern community that's not on a grid, Nunavut uses 99, like its energy is 99% fuel, comes from fossil fuels, so that's not a sustainable energy source, obviously. And also in terms of practicalities, like in Quebec, I think what is it, 7 cents per kilowatt hour or something. So, yeah, in Nunavut, it's like 35, 40.
Oh, wow.
So anything that's going to require a lot of electricity, even if it's like LED lighting, these costs are going to add up over time. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. In spite of all what we just said right now, like what sort of initiatives can be taken right now to solve those food problems? I'll start with you, if your throat is okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, you're asking what initiatives?
Yeah, like what actions can be taken to solve it? It's you did say like just now, it's like my mind was like, oh, let's just build a bunch of greenhouses there, and I'm sure that'll all work. And it's like, there's some that work, but I just imagine it right now, like a abandoned greenhouse.
Yeah.
And I can see this. I just imagining my childhood home and our greenhouse, which we used for a while, and then just a bunch of snow accumulated on it and just sat there.
Mhm.
What sort of changes would you take? And maybe another way to think about it is like, what portion of it is technical? What portion is political? What portion is social? How would you sort of break that down?
All right.
Sorry, I asked like what 8
Big
questions
questions, yeah.
there. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, again, I think that, you know, if we're talking about food insecurity, you need to deal with income, like, you know, have better income distribution systems, and then you will largely solve that problem. When it comes to revitalizing, you know, the food network, the food system, improving food sovereignty, look at decolonial approaches. So one of the things that I was promoting in my previous role, and which I still, you know, at the side of my desk still try to promote now, is the elevation of the hunter back to the sort of the status that it held, that they held before colonialism. So, and one way to do that is to pay them a salary and say, you know, hunt what you can. If the weather's bad, I mean, don't worry, you're still going to get paid, but like hunt what you can, distribute it to communities. And this has not panned out as a wide scale intervention that's had the support of governments yet, but there's been a number of pilots that have shown that, you know, when you add up all of the added benefits to this and give them quantify them in some way. And then by that I mean the education to youth, environmental stewardship, nutrition, community wellness, all these things. The salary is less than what you gain from it, so it's basically and it's an investment in communities in the future. And that's something that would really go a long way to sort of reverse the damage that's been done by, the practices of, settled communities that the government forcing people to give up nomadic lifestyle, which is how you hunt effectively, and forcing them into communities where you have limited means of leaving them. The dog slaughter of the 1960s is another big issue that I won't get into in detail here, but if you want to know more about that, there's a reason why we have we went to snowmobile so quickly, and we have there's a limited capacity to harvest in the north. So anyway, but going to so that's what I would say is like a big policy level shift that could take place. I don't know about technical solutions being so viable, and the reason I say that is because we've had tech-based solutions to food systems in the past, and they've kind of worked, but they've kind of not. They come with a lot of baggage, and so one of them I think of is the way that we've been able to process and package food, and so we have these wonderful, cheap, shelf-stable food products that are easily accessible and also easily digestible, and they're tasty as well. But this has kind of brought on an entire public health crisis. So it's a double-edged sword when you have these technologies that create really wonderful foods. There's no need, when there's no external need for an element of nutrition, then obviously that gets left by the wayside. Another one is another tech-based solution is the green revolution. So we went from small-scale agriculture in the early part of the 20th century to one that is now very heavily mechanized, very dependent on external inputs such as fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides, also very dependent on certain kinds of seeds that are patented and that you have to buy from companies like Monsanto. And so this has been great for, well, it's been by far greatest for agribusinesses because they basically control everything. They control all of these inputs. They control the seeds. They often have they're the ones selling the machinery. But it's also been kind of a great thing for consumers because we've gone from, on our parents' generation spending close to 20% of our income on food to now it's less than 10%. So we're in an era of very cheap food, but it's been a disaster for the environment. We have, soils that have been completely degraded. We have the agricultural sector, which is one of the primary contributors to greenhouse gases in this country. And then we also have a rural economy and farmers that are essentially impoverished or are so deeply in debt that, this is an industry that's in crisis because nobody wants to enter it because they know that the costs are so high and the risks are so high and the chance for, financial success is so
Individual
limited.
farmers,
Yeah.
that is.
Yeah, individual farmers. And yeah, there's very successful agribusinesses, but that's another thing.
Oh.
Yeah.
So you're here in Montreal now, the last 2 years. It sounds like you want to get more into urban agriculture. I have a question. This is probably for both of you. I grew up in Alberta and around farms, and cows would come and knock down our fence, and I would have to corral them back. So I got a little bit of experience with farming and stuff like that. And you see these wide swaths of land of barley and wheat and all that, and they're just acres. And then you hear about urban agriculture, and it sounds super cool. And it's we're doing it on a roof. And you look at the size of a roof, and it's not as big as a field. I guess what are some of the expectations that some people should have about urban agriculture? What is sort of the, I don't know, elevator pitch or the goal of urban agriculture compared to traditional farming?
I think quality is a big one. So we focus on quality to start, because obviously we have to sell at a premium because the technology is expensive and everything, is like that. So urban agriculture tends to focus on quality first, while we develop the ways to produce higher quantities. But if you're just talking about roof areas, there's not that much in the cities, so you're limited. But that's why we go vertical, so we can actually maximize the amount of space that we're using. So we use abandoned warehouses, parking garages, whatever space we can use, and then we go as high as we can. But just there's a lot of stories that are coming out that are making this industry seem more feasible every day. Just on the topic of AstroYeast, because I find it fascinating. There's a wheat farm, or not a wheat farm, it's a in-farm, they called it, and they were growing wheat vertically, and they produced 25 times more than a field could produce with the same amount of space. So it was pretty interesting that they could do that hydroponically when we thought staple crops would probably be impossible to grow indoors. So that's my side of the urban, but I think we need to get community gardens started and get people passionate about food again, because we're really disconnected from food completely.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's a personal thing, you don't have to answer, but like your reasons for moving from here, I guess switch gears to more urban food movement.
Yeah, my reasons for moving are deeply personal. I don't want to do that, but I don't know a lot about the urban food movements. But I mean, I think that we do have to sort of set our expectations quite low. Like there are some barriers to this being a really viable source of food. I know that it's going to be increased, but I think that like we really have to, while entertaining these projects that ultimately eventually start to like increase yields and become more viable, we got to really focus on the people that are producing our food now, so our farmers and our producers in the rural area. But that's going to be harder when we're increasingly an urban country, and and we're more and more being separated on political lines by whether we live in a city or whether we live in the country. So yeah.
Great. I think I'm going to open it up to Q&A if we're good for that. So we have some, I believe we have questions from the internet out there. But I guess I'll check in first. Is there anybody in the audience who has any questions? We have, yes, we do. We'll start there.
Thank you. Yes, when we're speaking about food sustainability, sovereignty, and security, there's always a trade-off between having things delivered locally, and in some cases that's at high expense in terms of the heating requirements, the hydroponic considerations, and water availability versus the transportation channels. This gives us a lot to think about, even when we throw the right proteases and enzymes to the mix. One thing that has not been discussed today is the future use of RNA templates for synthesizing protein-rich foods in abundance with high yield. We're in the incipient stages of technology. We're using it for all sorts of medicinal, or I should say medical purposes, such as neuroregeneration, as well as, I would say, organelle regeneration. But ultimately, there will be an application vis-a-vis the food industry. How do you say, realistic an entrant do you see this technology as emerging within the next 5 to 10 years? And what sustainability concerns will present themselves when we're able to have yielding RNA template synthesis of different types of food competing against more natural ways of producing food? Thank you.
I'm not familiar with that, but I think that probably there's going to be a lot of these technologies that come out and surprise us. Like there's so many people studying things that I'm not, there's too much to keep track of and keep up to date with. So I think that there's a lot of innovations around the corner. But they're resource intensive and for sure energy intensive. So those are the challenges, I think. But maybe you know more.
Well, one thing that's sort of like hampered another, in addition to the costs of the hydroponic shipping containers I was talking about, was just like local demand. Like, there's not a ton of demand for, say, leafy greens in northern communities. And so I think that like when we're exploring novel foods that are, sort of created in a lab or what have you, or coming out of a bioreactor, it's really worth knowing whether or not local tastes will allow it. And so I think of like one example that's really recent and shows the limitations of novel foods is the plant-based burger movement. So these companies that were valued at quite a lot of money a couple of years ago are now worth, less than, I think, a tenth or less than what they reached at their peaks, because they totally overestimated the demand for this kind of food. Like it's at the end of the day, people just, they want something that they're familiar with. And so again, I'm not going to I think that there's potential, and I was curious to see if there was going to be like a sampling booth here with the product that's being researched right now. And I'd love to try it. And I'm sure there's other people that would, but I mean, at the end of the day, do you have a market for it? Is this something that fits with local tastes? Is a big question.
We have another question.
Hi. Yes, you actually just spoke to my question a little bit. But I mean, I feel like all humans' relationship with food is something deeply personal. And it varies greatly. But there is like a subpopulation here in Montreal where they love to try new foods, go out, try different cultures, go out and you see a new vegetable or a new fruit, you want to buy it. What does it taste like? So I just want to know, from your experience, how much does that exist? When something does show up new in the grocery store, do you notice that same subpopulation that is drawn to it? Or do you find the relationship with food is deeply different in that sense?
Yeah, I mean, everybody's different. I mean, there's people that are more adventurous about food than others, and some people that really loved all these, all the different kinds of processed foods that come out, like the different flavors of Kit Kat, and others that love to try new cuisines all the time. So it really, I mean, I agree. You're saying that it's food is a deeply personal thing. So yeah, I think that, like, for example, things like this AstroYeast that we're talking about today, there will probably be a lot of people that would really love it and really find it like a viable part of their diets. But I think that maybe it's misplaced to say like, okay, well, this target population in particular is going to do wonders for them. I think that's saying you're presuming a lot there.
So similar with strawberries, you have different cultural tastes and preferences. Like a lot of indoor growers instantly go for white strawberries because it's different and they could stand out in the market. But as soon as you put that on the shelves in Quebec, nobody buys it. They rot on the shelves because it's not to our taste. Whereas, in Japan, they love that. So I think it's interesting. It's true that we're pushing something on the community that maybe it's not for them, So that's very interesting perspective.
I'll be honest. When I saw a white strawberry, I thought it just wasn't ready yet. They have white strawberries you can eat and they're ready to eat.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
They have white strawberries, pink strawberries.
I definitely learned something today. Okay.
Blue strawberries.
Blue
No,
strawberry.
I'm joking.
Okay, all right. Now the lies are. I see a bunch of the red circle with numbers on the chat thing. Is there some questions on?
We do have a question on the chat, so I'll read it out loud for you now. This one is from Eric Huang. What sort of considerations should startup type ventures like AstroYeast tread carefully with when interacting with culturally significant groups like First Nations and Inuit in terms of surveying market demands and providing technological support as settlers?
Ask people, talk to people is just my basic suggestion is to go into these communities and see what people think about this and whether or not there's any willingness there. And I think it's really just as simple as that. And if you get the answer that you weren't looking for, then that's probably going to determine the success of your project.
I think similarly with any startup, doesn't matter if you're going to the Native community to pitch it, you always have to consult with your customer base before you spend any money on your project. So just a heads up.
So another question?
A lot of comments, but no questions.
Okay.
But we do have another one in the space
Yep.
here.
Thank you. As a part of the Deep Space Food Challenge, a part of it was adapting the project so it could be viable in Canada's north. And the government often implements these types of strategies to solve problems that they've created to begin with. So in your opinion, what would be an actual solution, or maybe not solution, but how could the government help in terms of policies or programs in terms of food security and food sovereignty that you think would actually be viable? I know you've talked a bit about, improving income, but is there, it also doesn't necessarily solve the issues with transportation and getting up there. So is there something that the government can do to actually help communities get back to their roots and, maybe solve this in a more grassroots movement? Or is it impossible to have the government, does it not connect?
Yeah, and then I do realize that this is I mean, your hand was kind of forced in saying like, oh, we could potentially use this space technology in the Canada's north, because that's basically what your funders are asking you to do. But it's part of, I know, and the federal government has a history of coming up with ideas that are not applicable or not, basically coming up with ideas that come from outside of the territories that they're dealing with, or outsourcing these ideas to groups that may not be familiar with the territory. So the big thing I'm always maybe I'm always expecting that the government can do better in terms of consulting local communities and also working with them and finding out what solutions they want. So I mentioned that harvester salary program, which is something that the government could buy into if there's the willingness to do so. And that's one that's basically an idea that comes from communities. Again, there's not a ton of examples of the federal government doing doing things with the involvement of communities. So it'd be great. It'd be a real sea change for them to start doing that. But that's all I can say about that is that I wish I could see better solutions being put forward, but unfortunately the whole way that they come up with these ideas is sort of flawed from the start, because they're not actually drawing these ideas from communities. I don't know if that answers your question, or if I just rambled for 5 minutes. Yeah.
I'm not sure if I'm allowed to do this, but whatever. I'm the moderator. I can do whatever I want. Okay. I'm curious about the AstroYeast team. There's the 4 of you here. What sort of thoughts do you have, good or bad or otherwise, after hearing this conversation? If anybody wanted to talk.
Yeah.
Stephen?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, it's been super insightful, and I think the way we kind of approach it for the space component is really, you know, the CSA has these requirements, and want to fulfill these requirements. But you know, for the Canada North perspective, has to be a different approach. Cannot be just, oh, we have these requirements. You know, it needs to come from conversations. It needs to have them also involved, like fully, I think. It shouldn't be us pushing like our project, you know, we have this cool thing, use it, you know. It has to be, you know, something I think that either we can provide the support, the technical support, whatnot, and they provide us with the ideas, you know, and then we try to build it, and we try to make it work. And then it's always gonna be like a back and forth, and more them pushing us than us pushing. Well, we don't push them. They push us to, oh, we need this. Oh, can we do this? Can we do that? And then I think that might be a better approach to kind of really, I guess, help or improve overall quality of life. And I think also some of the other issues that were mentioned, like energy, you know, transportation and whatnot, those also come into like a lot of consideration, because of course, whatever we build, we're gonna need to transport it. It's not gonna take things out of thin air. We have to already give it stuff. We need energy as well. We need to transport. So there's a lot of other consideration that, you know, you can't just bring the technology there and just be like, oh, you guys figure it out. And another aspect is, of course, this thing, we need to build it. We need to maintain it. So I think one thing I've seen, it's not just like Canada North, it's also other communities elsewhere in the world. So, you know, like in the West, we like to be like, oh, we're the white saviors, we're gonna help them, you know, so, and then we give them the technology, and then like 2 years later, they stop using it because it broke down, nobody knows how to maintain it. So I think also the approach is giving them the ability to have that technical background as well, so that like if things goes down, they can build it themselves. You know, if they need to build it themselves, they need to maintain it. It can all be done by them, instead of like having, oh, we have to go there and fix it. And in fact, the design wise, it could even be they design it with us so that, you know, they know exactly what's going on. You know, they have full control of how the technology is being built, how it's being maintained, everything.
Yeah.
So that's, I think that's what we're learning from it.
Any other team members?
Yeah, I think it's been very interesting to hear all this. You know, we're definitely not at the stage where we're trying to go up north right now. And I think it's the same thing for space. You know, there's still a lot of challenges that we need to overcome before it gets implemented there as well. So that's I think the kind of what we're trying to do, is just start to understand it. And then once the challenges, you know, start to other people working in other areas start to figure things out, and energy is a big one, technical expertise, how simple the system is. Then this gives us, you know, a good footing on where to go next. You know, the one great thing I think that is good about yeast is it does have a natural aroma. It's a very nice flavor, but you could add different flavor elements. So, you know, we could discuss with the community, what flavors do they like? And another thing is, I know here we're very vitamin D deficient, you know, as a people. And so
The sun went down 40 minutes ago, by the way, so continue. Yeah, okay.
And I know in space, that's a big concern, is what nutrients do they have there? So our product is one that would theoretically be able to be tailored to people, you know, with feedback, what flavors, what nutrients are needed. So I do think could be an interesting one, but, you know, in the right setting, in the right condition, you know, everything else permitting.
Yeah.
And I just also want to add that everything you said today is definitely being taken into consideration. We are not going into communities now. It's just, you know, it's really important to us to have those conversations first. We're not just going to go in and trying to implement technology that these people don't want or don't need, right? that's why we're starting here with the panel. Like, let's start by having a conversation about it. Is it something that could work? Is it not? If it is potentially something that could work, what are the steps we need to do to get there? And how do we make sure that it's culturally acceptable? How do we make sure that it's socially acceptable, if it is at all, right? So I just want to thank you all for being here today and providing your great feedback. So thank you.
Yeah. I don't know if there's any other remote questions or.
Yes, we do have a few. I have two. So I'll start with this. First one, we've put it up on the screen here. Working with communities. Oh, sorry, it's from Ali Mady to everyone. So working with communities is definitely critical to the success of any project. Some of the greenhouse projects I've encountered in Nunavik have worked with the students to grow and harvest local plants. How do you foresee the collaboration with various organizations in the North, such as the school boards, hunter support groups, health centers, etc.?
Good question. Yeah, I mean, I think you've identified some of the big players that would be good to talk to, but yeah, the more different groups that you talk to, the better, I think. And yeah, I do know of some. I'm aware of also some greenhouse projects that have been fairly successful in some communities. So I'm not saying it's like a complete, nothing is a foregone conclusion. There's always ways to make things work, but yeah, there's ways to do it well. For example, by talking to the communities at first, seeing what their needs are, what their willingness is, training, all that sort of thing, for something to succeed, rather than saying like, here's something that you didn't ask for and now we're leaving. So.
And was there, you said you had a second question as well?
Yes, so also up on the screen, did AstroYeast project concentrate only on the technical to build their bioreactor without taking into account the biotechnological standards to avoid the yeast mutation and the genetic instability?
We can't answer that because we're not on the AstroYeast team, so we might. Is there a mic that they could?
Okay, well, this is actually a very interesting question because our team actually first got together as part of the iGEM competition 2 years prior to AstroYeast being founded. And in that project, we actually focused on how we can stabilize the yeast cells for space. So in that project, we were actually focused on simulating microgravity or similar things that you experience in the moon or the ISS. Because it is known that biology behaves weird in space. We always hear about, twins who go up to space and how you get weaker and your bones change. Well, a big part of that is gravity and how gravity influences biology. We were born on this earth. We came from this earth. So that's a big consideration. And it's the same thing for yeast. But what we did see and what you do notice is that you go through a period of rapid change where it adapts to the conditions and then it starts to stabilize again. And then the changes happen over longer terms. So as long as you're doing the right tests and making sure that, nothing's coming out too toxic, no dangerous byproducts are being produced, and you do monitor that, that was a major consideration. So absolutely.
Cool.
Very, very simple and short question. What are the implications of the AstroYeast project? And also, if anyone else has anything to add on the developing world, that should be a source for concern. After all, many sub-Saharan countries have tremendous food security issues that should be at the top of our list of priorities, and they're not. I'd like to hear the opinions of the AstroYeast team as well as the panelists on these issues. Thank you.
I don't know about sub-Saharan Africa, but they have in Abu Dhabi a lot of indoor farm technologies now that are working in the desert, which is a really challenging place to make this work. So you know, I think it's a good first step, but I think we're a long way from getting it in the developing countries, but you're right. We need to also think about them because they don't even have shelf stable food. So
Anyone from the AstroYeast?
Yeah, and first I'd like to kind of follow up on the sort of the other regions with like food security issues. So a lot of them, they are kind of leapfrogging technologies. So essentially, like let's say in Canada, we had to go through like one example would be like for cellular networks, right? We went to 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G, you know. In many of these like what we call developing countries, they essentially just skip some of these steps. They don't go to 2G, 3G. They went maybe from nothing to now they're using 4G, 5G. Regarding food security, same thing. A lot of them, they are developing their own expertise. They don't really, I would say they don't really need like us. Like the kind of support we give is, you know, we have our universities where they can come to study, and then they bring back knowledge that they gain in the universities to their own country, and then they can develop their own technology that they need to meet their needs. Because like I've taken a course where they kind of taught us that is in many of these communities, you know, like we think we have this idea of what they need, but in fact, they don't really need that, or whatever we bring is way too complex or like way too much maintenance, that they have much better solutions that are much better adapted. So like one of the stories is, I think there is this boy like somewhere in sub-Saharan Africa that I think their communities had wells that weren't, you know, pumping water. So he kind of invented like a kind of turbine system that's super cheap, that they made out of a bike, and that allowed them to provide water for themselves. So they have this, they're people too, they're very smart. They can develop their own technologies. So the kind of support, I guess, that we can provide is really, you know, if they need access to certain ideas, technologies, that we are able to provide for them. So now regarding kind of the implications of AstroYeast, so what we're trying really focused right now on a very short term is to kind of develop our technologies such that it's adapted for space. You know, going to communities and whatnot, that requires much more conversations, much more, you know, involvement in the community. Right now, we're really, you know, we're still kind of like in our infancy, right? We're still trying to solve the challenge of space, which are, of course, different than the challenges of communities, because in space, culture doesn't really matter that much, right? And because it's really like a big international tech team, you know, it's a different set of challenges. And so that's kind of our focus right now. But eventually we would like to kind of help communities on Earth, because of course, when you're developing space technologies, you're not just developing it for space, you're trying to also help in some ways people on Earth. And it doesn't matter if it's in Canada's north or just people in Montreal. We would like to eventually help people here that are living on the planet Earth.
Mhm.
So yeah, like if we can in some ways help people in the north, that's amazing. But it's not necessarily like, that's not like, we're not pushing that, you know, like just like, oh, we have to help. You know, it's whoever, I guess, we can help will help.
Yeah. We got 54 seconds left, and I just point on that. I had a friend, they were a mathematician, and they were doing like more theoretical mathematician stuff. And I asked them like, okay, what's the practical use of the thing you're doing now? And they're like, oh, there's no practical use for it. It's just a fun little math thing we have right now. And it's like, so like, what's going to happen to it? Like, why would you develop that? And they said like, well, there's been like lots of cases where we come up with like a math thing that is just sort of a fun thing. Then we put it on the shelf for like a couple of decades. And then we come up to this really gnarly math problem again, decades down the road. And like, wait a minute, couldn't we use that thing we put on the shelf like 20 years ago and apply it to this? I wouldn't be a person to be able to give you a concrete example of that, but like that can also be the thing. It's like, it doesn't have to work right now, but it can be put on the shelf for years down the road. So it is 2 seconds left. So do you have any closing thoughts from either of you?
Thank you so much for this opportunity and this great conversation. I learned a lot.
Yeah, and thanks for everybody's openness to my negativity.
No, it was insightful. It was insightful. Yeah, so thanks to you folks. That was really, I learned a lot. And thanks to Fourth Space for being so cool about everything here and the water that we have here and the lemonade that we might have to crack open that we'll drink. And support from Concordia and the Canadian Space Agency Deep Space Food Challenge. There, got it right. So yeah, thanks everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, AstroYeast. Thank you, Trevor. Thank you, Ophelia and Wade and Gordon, who had to leave us. Thanks for coming into Fourth Space today. For everyone online, all of you here, thank you for your questions. We're going to be closing up the Zoom and the live stream, but a quick reminder that this conversation is already available on our YouTube channel if you'd like to revisit it or share it with others. Please join us again at Fourth Space. We love having you here and keeping these conversations going. Have a great evening, and we'll see you again soon.